My father had been dead for exactly 4 hours when my brother changed the locks. I found out when I pulled into the gravel driveway of the house we grew up in, the house that smelled like cigarettes and motor oil and the cheap coffee he drank every morning. I sat in my Honda for a minute, just staring at the front door. The paint was peeling worse than I remembered. The porch light was on, even though it was 2 in the afternoon. That was something my mom used to do before she left. She always said a light on meant someone was waiting. No one was waiting for me, though. I tried my key 3 times before I realized it wasn't sticking. It was turning. The lock was just different, new. I pushed the door anyway, like maybe I was doing it wrong, like maybe the grief was making me stupid, but the door didn't budge. I leaned my forehead against the wood and I could hear him inside, my brother Mark. He was on the phone. His voice was loud and careless, like it always was. He was laughing about something, laughing while our father's body was still warm somewhere in a hospital morgue. I knocked, not hard at first, just a polite tap to let him know I was there. He didn't come, so I knocked harder. I heard him sigh through the door, then his footsteps. He opened it just a crack, just enough for me to see his red, wind-blown face and the sweat on his upper lip. "Hey," he said, like I was a neighbor he didn't want to talk to. "Mark," I said, "the key didn't work." "Yeah," he said, "I changed the locks." I waited for more, for a reason, for an explanation that made any kind of sense. He just stared at me. His eyes were the same as my father's, that cold blue that could look right through you, like you were made of glass. "Why?" I asked. "Because Dad didn't want you here. That's what he said before he went." I swear my heart stopped. Not metaphorically. I felt my chest seize up like someone had reached inside and squeezed. I grabbed the door frame to keep standing. The wood was rough under my palm, splinters pressing into my skin. "He never said that," I whispered. "He said it to me the night before the stroke. He told me he didn't want you at the funeral. He said you made your choice when you left." "I left for college, Mark. I was 18. That's not leaving. That's growing up." "You know what I mean." He tried to close the door. I stuck my foot in the gap. Not hard enough to hurt him, just hard enough to stop him. He looked down at my shoe like it was something disgusting. "I'm not leaving," I said. "I want to see him. I want to say goodbye. You can say goodbye at the cemetery like everyone else. The service is Thursday at 11. Don't be late." "Mark, please." He pushed the door against my foot. Not hard, but firm. A message. I pulled my foot back because what else could I do? Fight my way into my own father's house, make a scene on the front porch while the neighbors watched. The door clicked shut. I heard the deadbolt slide home, then his footsteps walking away. I stood there for a long time. Long enough for the sun to move across the sky and turn the shadows long and cold. Long enough for my phone to buzz with texts from people offering condolences they didn't really mean. Long enough for me to realize that my brother had just locked me out of my own grief. I drove to a hotel that night, a cheap one near the highway, because I hadn't planned on needing a place to stay. I had planned on sleeping in my old room, on lying in my twin bed with the scratchy blue blanket and staring at the ceiling like I did when I was 16, and so desperate to leave I could taste it. I had planned on finding some piece of him left behind, a shirt that still smelled like him, a note in his handwriting, something. Instead, I sat on a bed that smelled like bleach, and I called my best friend Sarah. She didn't answer. I called my Aunt Julie. She didn't answer either. I called my boyfriend Ethan, and he answered, but he was distracted. He was at a bar with his coworkers. He said, "Sorry, babe, that's rough, but we'll talk when you get home." He didn't understand. No one understood. My father was dead, and my brother had turned into a stranger, and I was alone in a hotel room that cost $89 a night, and I had never felt so completely erased. The funeral was Thursday at 11. I got there at 10:30. I wore a black dress I bought at Target on my way out of town. It was too tight in the shoulders and too long in the hem, but it was black, and that was all that mattered. The cemetery was small, old, the kind of cemetery where half the headstones are from the 1800s, and the grass is always yellow, no matter how much it rains. I parked far away from the gravesite. I wanted to walk. I wanted to feel the ground under my feet and take deep breaths and prepare myself for what was coming. There were maybe 30 people there, mostly my father's old coworkers from the plant, a few neighbors, some cousins I hadn't seen in years, and Mark, standing at the front with his wife Denise and their 2 kids. He had his arm around Denise, like he was the one who needed comforting, like he was the one who had lost a father. I walked up slowly. People looked at me. Some of them nodded. Some of them looked away. One of my cousins, Laura, came over and hugged me. She smelled like vanilla and cigarette smoke, just like she did when we were kids. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry about all of it." I didn't know what she meant by all of it, but I nodded like I did. I tried to stand near the front, near the casket. It was closed. My father had requested a closed casket. I didn't know why. Maybe he looked bad at the end. Maybe Mark decided it for him. I would never know. Mark saw me coming and shifted his body, just slightly, just enough to block me from getting too close. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. His body did the talking. "You're not welcome here. You're on the outside looking in." I stood behind him, behind Denise.
Behind his kids who were fidgeting and whispering and picking at the grass. I watched the back of my brother's head and I thought about all the things I wanted to say to him, about how we used to be close, about how he taught me to ride a bike and then pushed me down just to watch me cry, about how he told me I was adopted when I was 7 just to see the look on my face, about how he was always cruel in small ways, but I forgave him because he was my brother, and that's what you do. The pastor spoke, some man I had never met, who talked about my father like he knew him, like he had ever sat on the porch with him drinking whiskey and watching the sunset. My father wasn't a church man, he was a factory man. He was a man who came home with grease under his fingernails and fell asleep in his recliner before dinner. He was a man who told me he loved me exactly 3 times that I could remember. Once when my dog died, once when I graduated high school, and once when I told him I was moving across the country for a job. He said, "I love you, baby girl," and then he coughed like the words hurt coming out. The pastor said nice things about him, generic things. He was a hard worker. He loved his family. He will be missed. None of it was wrong exactly. It just wasn't true either. Not the whole truth. The whole truth was that my father was a complicated man who didn't know how to show love, so he showed anger instead.
The whole truth was that he and my brother were the same person in different bodies. 2 men who built walls instead of bridges, and then blamed everyone else for being on the wrong side. After the service, there was a reception at the VFW hall. My father spent every Friday night there playing poker with his friends. I didn't want to go, but I didn't know what else to do. Go back to the hotel? Sit alone and cry? I had done enough of that. So I followed the cars to the VFW hall, and I walked inside, and I saw the spread of cold cuts and potato salad and store-bought cookies. I saw the cheap paper plates and plastic forks. I saw my brother holding court near the bar like he was the man of the hour. I got a plate of food I didn't eat and a cup of coffee I didn't drink. I stood in a corner and let people come to me. Most of them said the same things. "I'm sorry for your loss. He was a good man. You look so much like your mother." The last one stung every time. My mother, who left when I was 12, who packed a suitcase one night and drove away and never came back, who called me on my birthday sometimes but never on Christmas, who was probably living in Florida with her 3rd husband and didn't even know my father was dead. I was standing there feeling sorry for myself when Mark walked over. He had a beer in his hand. His face was flushed. He had been drinking, probably since the cemetery. "You gonna say something?" he said. "What do you want me to say, Mark?" "I don't know, something."
You haven't said 2 words to me since you got here. You changed the locks on our father's house. You told me he didn't want me at his funeral. What am I supposed to say to you? He took a long sip of his beer. He looked at me over the rim of the cup. His eyes were watery. I couldn't tell if it was from grief or alcohol or both. "He really did say it," he said. "The night before the stroke. He said he didn't want you there. He said you abandoned this family, and you didn't get to come back just because he was dying." I felt my throat close up. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not in front of him. Not in front of all these people. "I didn't abandon anyone," I said. "I went to college, I got a job, I built a life. That's not abandonment. That's called being an adult. You could have come home, you could have visited, you could have called more than once a month, but you didn't, because you were too busy with your fancy friends and your fancy life.
I don't have a fancy life, Mark. I have a one-bedroom apartment and a car with a check engine light and a job that barely pays my bills. I'm not out here living some glamorous dream. I'm just trying to survive. Could have fooled me. He walked away, just turned and walked back to the bar like we had finished a conversation about the weather, like he hadn't just eviscerated me in front of everyone who could hear. I stood there with my cold coffee and my uneaten potato salad, and I felt something inside me crack. Not break. Not yet. Just crack. Like ice on a lake in early spring, thin and dangerous, and waiting for the weight that would send me under. The lawyer called 3 days later. I was back in my apartment by then, 300 miles away from my father's house, and my brother's cold eyes, and the cemetery with the yellow grass. I had taken 2 days off work. I was lying on my couch watching bad reality TV and eating cereal straight from the box when my phone rang. The number was from my hometown area code. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello?" I said. "Is this Emma Turner?" The voice was older, male, professional but warm. "Yes, this is Harold Vance. I was your father's attorney. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I said. My voice sounded small, weak. I hated it. "I'm calling because your father's will is ready to be read. There's a provision that requires your presence. Both you and your brother need to be here in person." "When?" I asked. "Tomorrow at 10 a.m. My office is on Main Street. Do you know where that is?" "I know where it is." "Good. I'll see you then." "And Emma?" "Yes?" "Your father spoke very highly of you, in his own way. I thought you should know that." He hung up before I could respond. I sat there with the phone in my hand and the cereal getting stale on the coffee table, and I replayed his words over and over. Your father spoke very highly of you, in his own way. What did that mean? What way? My father didn't speak highly of anyone. He didn't speak at all if he could help it. So what had he said to this lawyer that made him pick up the phone and call me just to tell me that? I didn't sleep that night. I drove back to my hometown at 5 in the morning. The sun was just coming up when I hit the highway, pink and orange and gold spreading across the sky like someone had spilled paint. It was beautiful. The kind of beautiful that makes you feel small and insignificant. Like no matter what happens in your life, the sun will still rise, and the world will still turn, and your grief is just a drop in an ocean of other people's grief. I got to the lawyer's office at 9:45. It was an old brick building on the corner of Main and 2nd. A sign on the door said, Harold Vance, Attorney at Law. There was a brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. I didn't use it. I just walked inside. The waiting room was small and dark, wood paneling on the walls, a dusty plant in the corner, a receptionist who looked like she had been working there since the 70s. She told me to have a seat and pointed to a row of chairs that smelled like old cigarettes. I sat down and waited. Mark showed up at 10:05. He had Denise with him. Of course he did. He couldn't do anything without her. She was the engine behind his cruelty. I was sure of it. Before Denise, my brother was difficult, but he wasn't malicious. After Denise, he became someone else. Someone who kept score. Someone who punished. Someone who locked his sister out of her father's house and called it justice. They sat across from me. Mark wouldn't look at me. Denise did. She looked at me with a smile that was almost sweet, almost kind. But I had seen that smile before. It was the smile she gave you right before she said something that cut you to the bone. "You look tired, Emma," she said. "I didn't sleep well. Funerals will do that to you." I didn't respond. What was there to say? She knew I hadn't been to the funeral. Not really. She knew I had been kept at arm's length the whole time. She was there when Mark blocked me from the casket. She was there when he walked away from me at the VFW hall. She was complicit. And now she was sitting across from me with her kind smile and her careful words and pretending like none of it had happened. The lawyer came out a few minutes later. He was an old man with white hair and thick glasses and a suit that didn't quite fit. He shook our hands one by one. His grip was firm but gentle. He looked at me longer than he looked at Mark, like he was trying to tell me something without words. "Come on back," he said. Let's get this done. His office was bigger than the waiting room, but not by much. Bookshelves lined the walls, legal volumes and dusty encyclopedias, and a few framed photos of what I assumed were his grandchildren. He sat behind a massive wooden desk and motioned for us to sit in the chairs across from him. Mark and Denise sat together. I sat alone on the other side.
The lawyer opened a folder. He put on his glasses. He cleared his throat. And then he started reading. This is the last will and testament of Arthur James Turner. He was my father. Arthur, not Art, not Artie. He hated nicknames. He said a man's name was his brand, and you don't change a brand. The will was standard at first. He left his truck to Mark, his tools to a friend from the plant, his record collection to me. I almost smiled at that. My father loved music, old country, Johnny Cash and Merle Haggard and Patsy Cline. He used to play those records on Sunday mornings while he made breakfast. Pancakes with too much butter and coffee so strong it could wake the dead. I learned to love that music because he loved it. I learned to love him because he was my father, and that's what children do, even when their fathers make it hard. But then the lawyer's voice changed. He paused. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses, and then he kept reading. The house on Elm Street, the house where I grew up, the house with the peeling paint and the porch light that stayed on all day, the house that Mark had just changed the locks on. The lawyer read the words slowly, carefully, like he wanted us to feel every syllable. I leave my house at 1427 Elm Street to my daughter, Emma Louise Turner. The room went silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that has weight, that presses down on you from all sides until you can't breathe. Mark stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard. What he said, the lawyer looked at him, calm, professional. Your father left the house to Emma. That's not possible. That house is mine. He promised me. He said I would get the house. The lawyer turned a page in the will. He ran his finger down the text. Then he looked up at Mark. Your father added a codicil 6 months ago. He was very specific about his intentions. The house goes to Emma. There is also a provision that you and your family have 30 days to vacate the premises. Mark's face went red, then purple. I had seen that color before, on our father, right before he lost his temper and threw something across the room. Mark was his father's son in every way that mattered. You're lying, he said. His voice was shaking. You changed it. You changed it to punish me. Mr. Turner, I assure you I did nothing of the kind. Your father was of sound mind when he made these changes. I have witnesses. I have documentation. Everything is legal and binding. Denise put her hand on Mark's arm, but her face was white. Her kind smile was gone, replaced by something uglier, something desperate. What about the rest of it? She said. The bank accounts, the life insurance. There has to be something else. The lawyer nodded. He turned to another page. There is a life insurance policy. The beneficiary is Emma. And there is a savings account, also in Emma's name. The total value is approximately $240,000. I stopped breathing. $240,000. My father had saved $240,000. My father, who drove a 20-year-old truck and wore jeans with holes in the knees and complained about the price of eggs. He had been saving, and he had left it all to me. Mark started laughing. It was a horrible sound, wet and jagged and full of something I couldn't name. He left you everything, he said. Everything. The house, the money, the records. And what did he leave me? The truck, the tools? A lifetime of taking care of him and I get the truck? You didn't take care of him, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. I didn't even know I was going to say them, but once they were out, I couldn't take them back. Mark turned to me. His eyes were wild. What did you say? You didn't take care of him. You moved into his house, you and Denise and the kids. You took over his space. You pushed him into the smallest bedroom. You ate his food and used his electricity, and you called that taking care of him. But you weren't taking care of him, Mark. You were using him. Denise stood up. Her chair didn't scrape. It crashed. How dare you, she said. We did everything for him. We cooked for him. We cleaned for him. We drove him to his doctor's appointments. Where were you, Emma? Where were you when he was sick? I was 300 miles away because you told me not to come.
You said he didn't want visitors. You said he was fine. You lied to me. You lied to me for years. The lawyer raised his hand. Please, he said. Please, let's all take a breath. But no one was listening anymore. Mark was pacing. Denise was crying. And I was sitting in that chair with my hands shaking and my heart pounding and my whole world tilting sideways. The lawyer tried to continue. There was more. A letter my father had written. He wanted me to read it aloud. The lawyer looked at me, asked if I was ready. I nodded, even though I wasn't. The letter was dated 3 months before he died. The handwriting was shaky. His hands had been bad at the end. Arthritis. The doctor said it was from years of factory work. But the words were clear. Every single one of them. My dear Emma, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for so many things. I'm sorry I wasn't the father you deserved. I'm sorry I let Mark push you away. I'm sorry I didn't tell you I was sick until it was too late. I'm sorry I didn't tell you I loved you every single day instead of just 3 times. You were always my favorite. I know a father shouldn't have favorites, but you were. You had your mother's fire, but you had my stubbornness. You were never afraid to leave, to build something new, something better. I admired that about you, even when I pretended not to. I wanted to give you the house because I know how much you loved it. I know you remember the good things, the Sunday pancakes, the music. The way I used to carry you upstairs when you fell asleep on the couch. I want you to have those memories. I want you to have a place to keep them safe. Mark will be angry. He's always been angry. That's my fault. I didn't teach him how to be soft. I didn't show him that love isn't weakness. But you learned it anyway. You learned it on your own. And that's why the house is yours. Take care of it. Play the records loud. Leave the porch light on for someone who needs to find their way home. I love you, baby girl. I always did. I just didn't know how to say it. The lawyer stopped reading. He folded the letter carefully. He put it back in the folder. Then he looked at me and his eyes were wet. I'm sorry, he said. I know this is a lot. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything except sit there with tears running down my face and my father's voice in my head. Not the voice I remembered, the one who yelled and threw things and kept his love locked up like a prisoner. A different voice. A softer voice. The voice he used when he thought no one was listening. Mark was standing by the window. His back was to me. His shoulders were shaking. I didn't know if he was crying or laughing or something in between. Denise was holding his arm, whispering to him, planning their next move. That's what they did. They planned. They strategized. They treated every interaction like a battle to be won. I stood up. My legs felt weak, like they might give out at any moment. I held on to the arm of the chair until I was sure I could stand on my own. Mr. Vance, I said. My voice was barely a whisper. Can I have the letter? He nodded. He took it out of the folder and handed it to me. His fingers brushed mine. They were warm, steady, everything I was not. I folded the letter carefully. I put it in my purse. And then I walked out of that office without looking at my brother, without saying goodbye, without giving Denise the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. I walked down Main Street, past the diner where my father used to take me for milkshakes, past the hardware store where he bought the paint for my room when I was 10, past the park where he taught me to ride a bike, and then pushed me and let me fall because he said getting back up was the most important thing a person could learn. I didn't go to the hotel. I drove to the house, 1427 Elm Street. The locks were still new. The key still didn't work, but I had something better than a key now. I had a piece of paper that said the house was mine. I had a letter that said my father loved me. I had $240,000 that said he had been watching. He had been paying attention. He had been saving for me the whole time. I sat on the front porch, on the steps where I used to wait for the school bus. I pulled out my phone. I called a locksmith. I told him to come as soon as he could.
And then I called Ethan. He answered on the second ring. "Hey babe, what's up?"
I need to tell you something. Is everything okay? I don't know, I said. I honestly don't know, but I think it might be. I told him everything, about the will, about the house, about the letter, about the $240,000. He listened. He didn't interrupt. When I was done, he was quiet for a long time. "So what are you going to do?" he said. "I'm going to stay here," I said. "For a while at least. I need to be in this house. I need to feel him here." "What about us?" I didn't know what to say to that. I loved Ethan. I did. But he was 300 miles away, and he hadn't come to the funeral, and he had been distracted and distant, and I was tired of being an afterthought. I was tired of being someone's second choice. "I'll call you tomorrow," I said. "I need to think." "Okay," he said, but he sounded hurt. I heard it in his voice, and I felt bad, but I couldn't carry his feelings on top of my own. I just couldn't. The locksmith came an hour later, a young guy with a ponytail and a kind face. He didn't ask questions. He just looked at the door and got to work. 20 minutes later, he handed me a new set of keys, 3 of them, silver and cold and heavy in my palm. I paid him and tipped him too much. He smiled and said, "Take care of yourself," and then he was gone. I unlocked the door. I walked inside. The house smelled different, not like my father anymore. It smelled like Mark and Denise, like their cooking and their laundry detergent and their kids' toys. I hated it. But underneath all of that, I could still smell him. Just a little. Just enough. The faint trace of coffee and motor oil and the cheap soap he used from the dollar store. I walked through the rooms. The living room where he fell asleep in his recliner. The kitchen where he made pancakes on Sunday mornings. The hallway with the photos on the wall. Me and Mark as kids. Our parents on their wedding day. A picture of my grandmother I didn't even know he had. And then I went to his bedroom. The small one. The one Mark had pushed him into. It was empty now. Just a bare mattress and a nightstand with a lamp. But on the nightstand there was something I didn't expect. A photo. In a cheap plastic frame. It was me. On my graduation day. Holding my diploma and smiling so wide I thought my face would split. I remembered that day. I remembered calling my father to tell him I had made it. He had said congratulations and then hung up. I thought he didn't care. But he had kept the photo. He had kept it on his nightstand. He had looked at it every night before he went to sleep. I sat on the bare mattress. I held the photo in my hands. And I cried. Not the quiet tears I had been crying for days. Not the controlled sniffles I had been hiding from everyone. I cried the way I used to cry when I was a child. Loud and messy and unashamed. I cried for my father. I cried for the years we lost. I cried for the brother who had become a stranger. And I cried for myself. For the girl who left and the woman who came back, and the space in between where everything got broken and lost and forgotten. I don't know how long I sat there, long enough for the sun to go down, long enough for the house to get dark, long enough for my phone to buzz with texts from Ethan and Sarah and a few others. I didn't answer any of them. I just sat there in the dark with my father's photo and my father's letter, and the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on me like a blanket, heavy but warm, suffocating but safe. Eventually, I got up. I walked to the front door. I looked at the porch light. It was still on, burning bright against the dark. My mother used to say a light on meant someone was waiting. She was wrong about a lot of things, but maybe she was right about that. I left the light on, not for someone else, for me. Because I was waiting. For the grief to get lighter, for the anger to fade, for the love to feel like enough. And because my father had left me a house and a letter and $240,000. But more than that,
He had left me a key. Not to the front door, to something bigger, something I was only just beginning to understand. He left me permission to stay, permission to belong, permission to be his daughter, even when he hadn't known how to be my father. I locked the door behind me. I put the new key in my pocket. And I walked out into the night, feeling something I hadn't felt in a very long time.
I felt like I was home.